HardTalk is in Brussels. My guest is the still pretty new Secretary-General of NATO, Anders Fogh Rasmussen. His first big challenge, Afghanistan. President Barack Obama has committed another 30,000 US troops to the fight against the Taliban. Some other NATO members have also committed to put more boots on the ground. But 8 years in, what does the Afghan conflict tell us about the state of the North Atlantic Alliance? General Anders Fogh Rasmussen, welcome to HardTalk.
Thank you.
Can we be clear about one thing? The current strategy in Afghanistan is being made and being driven from and in Washington, not in Brussels. Would you agree?
No, it's an alliance effort, but obviously we all know that the Americans take the lion's share of the burden in Afghanistan. So it is very important what is decided in Washington.
Yes, it's not just a question of the burden, it's a question of the strategic direction. For example, we saw 90 days of serious thinking from the Obama administration before deciding upon this extra 30,000 troops. There wasn't much consultation in Brussels, was there? That was hashed out between Obama, his generals, the Congress. It was an American decision and you had to fill in behind it.
Actually, there was a lot of consultations in Brussels, not in public like in Washington. But I do not blame the American administration that they spent some time to go through all this, because it is a very important decision to take. But in the meantime, we had consultations here in Brussels.
But it's a question of where the tail is and which is the dog that's wagging the tail. My point to you is that this is an alliance, NATO, that you are now head of. It is supposed to take collective decisions. But on Afghanistan, it isn't really a collective decision. The overwhelming burden, as you put it, of resourcing, of manpower, of commitment comes from the United States, and therefore your job is just to get the other allies to maintain a show of unity once America has decided what to do.
Yeah, but not just a show of unity. It's also a reality. Actually, during the last 3 years, other allies than the US have nearly doubled their troop contributions in Afghanistan. And during recent weeks, they have pledged additional around 7,000 troops on the top of the 38,000 they already have. So it's not just a show of unity, it is a real unity.
Well, let's talk specifics then. You talk about this 7,000 extra troops in 2010 coming from the non-US members of NATO. Let's look at the practicalities. How many new troops are France and Germany offering?
Well, both of them have announced that they will look closer into how they can proceed in Afghanistan, and both of them will await the international conference that will take place by the end of January.
So two of the most powerful European members of NATO have offered no new troops at all, yes?
Not yet, but they have clearly indicated a preparedness to look closer into how they can continue.
Look closer, you say, and you're being very diplomatic. You know as well as I do, the French defense minister has said that he believes the French have already made an enormous effort in Afghanistan. He sees no reason to expand it further.
Yeah, but it's true that the French have done a lot. They fight
in have fewer than 4,000 troops.
They fight in the eastern part of Afghanistan. They have taken quite some casualties.
They have fewer than 4,000 troops. The UK, which is a similar sized military, has 9,500. Are the French really doing, as the defense minister says, an enormous effort?
Yeah, well, it is a national decision. At our foreign ministers meeting last week, both France and Germany clearly indicated that they are now in a process of consideration, and I fully respect that.
But you haven't been in the job many months. You can stamp some authority on this alliance by telling certain member states that they must do more. Are you going to tell me that the French, the Germans, must do more given the current situation in Afghanistan?
I urge all allies to do more, and this is the reason why I have traveled a lot during the past weeks. I have called leaders in allied nations, and so far the result has been positive, additional 7,000 troops.
But not from France. I mean, I'm just wondering whether you are prepared to say here and now the French must do more.
Well, for me, the time frame is not the most important thing, but that we get additional troops. And if the Germans and the French will await the international conference, it's okay with me. I think it's important that all allies contribute more to Afghanistan.
Let's talk about caveats. So just let me quote you the words that your predecessor, Jaap de Hoop Scheffer, came up with 3 years ago. He said, putting caveats on NATO operations, as, for example, the Germans do, with the very strict restrictions on where their troops can go and what they can do. He says, putting those caveats on means putting caveats on NATO's entire future. Do you agree with that?
I agree with Jaap de Hoop Scheffer that nations should allow a flexible use of their troops in Afghanistan. We owe it to our commanders in the field that they can operate flexibly.
All caveats, is that what you're calling for?
I would urge allies to lift or diminish the use of caveats.
Are the Germans listening to you?
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
Well, they haven't lifted the caveats.
Let me stress that the Germans do a lot in Afghanistan. They conduct a huge amount of air transport in Afghanistan. They are present in the northern part of Afghanistan, and all provinces in Afghanistan constitute a real challenge today.
A real challenge, you say. It's going to be more of a challenge if the Netherlands and Canada, as some of their politicians have promised to do, pull out their troops in 2010 and 2011. Do you believe that is going to happen?
Well, so far they stay.
Well, I know, but 2010 and 2011 is coming close, and you've just said we're putting more troops in 2010, and I put it to you that if the Dutch and the Canadians are to be taken seriously, they may be withdrawing very significant numbers of fighting troops in the next 2 years.
Yeah, maybe. So far, it is an alliance consisting of 28 NATO countries plus 16 other partners, 44 all in all, and they stay committed. It's only natural that there is an ongoing discussion in all countries as to how they can continue their engagement in Afghanistan, and no decision has been made so far to withdraw from Afghanistan.
How worried are you by the signs that public opinion across the NATO membership area is turning against the military action in Afghanistan?
Obviously, it's a matter of concern. And I understand why people are impatient. I do believe they realize...
Well, they're not impatient, are they? Let's be serious. The military action has been going 8 years. I mean, it's hardly a sign of impatience if people across NATO area, from the United States to the UK to the Netherlands, are beginning to wonder whether this military action is ever going to work.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of impatience. Like me, they want to see clear progress on the ground. And this is also a reason why it's so essential that we have now started what I would call a new phase in our operation in Afghanistan, a transition to Afghan lead. Province by province, we will hand over lead responsibility for the security to the Afghans themselves, and then people can see that we, province by province, will have Afghan ownership, and our troops can move into a more supporting role.
This vision you have of transition beginning in the next 18 months or so, this premised, is it, on the continuation of the Hamid Karzai government, a government which is known to be corrupt, which has a very questionable democratic mandate, and which, according to Abdullah and other senior opposition politicians in Afghanistan, is incapable of changing its spots when it comes to good governance?
First of all, let me stress that we are not in Afghanistan to protect and defend a specific government. We are in Afghanistan to defend ourselves against terrorism. But having said that, it is obviously also of utmost importance to have a credible government in Kabul, and we must hold Karzai and his government to account and ensure...
Is Karzai credible?
He has promised now to step up the fight against corruption.
See, I ask you if Karzai is credible, you pause and say that he's promised something in the future. There are members of NATO, military operations involving thousands of troops, putting their lives on the line, partly under your control, for a man, for an Afghan government led by Hamid Karzai, who you cannot even say to me is credible at this moment in time?
Yeah, I am confident that he will commit himself to the fight against corruption